So this is the topic for today. Okay? The impact of energy or paradigm shift in energy. You know, we all discussed energy technological revolution, right? Shale gas or, let me repeat some of the changes we covered last class. First, I emphasize the decline in OECD demand, right? Decline in OECD demand, and increase in non-OECD demand. These two are most important changes, right? Emerging economies, they consume more energy. And I think particularly the Asian demand, right? There's a huge increase from Asian demand. Instead, from the supply side, also change, right? Middle Eastern or Russian production is expected to decline. Instead, U.S. Western production is expected to increase. These two changes, and what drove these two changes? We talked about, two twin technological revolutions, right? Horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, shale revolution. Now, the question today, these energy changes will have a lot of, impacts on the economy and, energy trading and everything. But the question today is, what will be the impact on foreign policy and security? That's the question for today. And the question he's asking, what are new dimensions of energy security? Which is a good question. He thinks that the definition of energy security must change, right? Due to these energy revolutions. And to ask, before we ask what are new dimensions, but we have to first know what are the key principles of energy security. What is the definition of energy security, right? In other words, countries, they take energy not simply as a commercial or business economic issue or technological issue, but at the same time it's a foreign policy issue, geopolitical issue, and security issue, right? And the conventional principles of energy security are going to change, right? Then into what, right? What are the new principles for energy security? I think first we have to define what is energy security. What constitutes energy security first? And he gives some good definitions. He gives several components of energy security. There must be some. Every country takes energy not simply as a commodity, right, or trading issue, but it's not like to import export energy. It's not like import export automobiles, right? It's different. Or import export, any manufactured goods. It's different, right? That's the difference energy has from other commodities. And we have oil and gas, right? Within energy, we have oil and gas. Oil and gas might pose, I think the real question he's asking, I don't think he's asking the difference between energy in general and other manufactured goods. I think the real question he's asking is, what's the difference between oil security and natural gas security? That's the real question he's asking. To put it, more squarely. natural gas security. It's an interesting question. Natural gas security. Energy security for the last 100 years was about oil security mostly, right? But you know, in the age of natural gas revolution, what new security questions or problems natural gas poses, right? That's the real question he's asking. And a lot of scholars are studying, examining these questions, right? And like I said, there's a demand center shifts and supply center shift, right? Clearly, it's an economic issue. It's a commerce issue. Trading relations change, but what are security problems, right, that come with these commercial changes? If America or Canada or Australia, if they become the center of natural gas production, right, what are new security problems that are driven, that are derived, right? Is natural gas security different from conventional energy security, which was based on oil, right? I think that's the question he's asking, although I'm not sure whether he's answering. David Yergin, I mean, he's top in this field. I mean, he's the top scholar, really top scholar. I mean, I don't see anyone above him. He's really top scholar. And although the way he, I mean, those are legitimate, interesting questions, but his chapter, frankly speaking, a little bit disappointing to me. I don't know how you read it, because he's so busy. I don't know. I mean, his chapter doesn't meet the expectations people would have about him. But these are, I think, good beginning, I think, material. Now, let's get to, I think, the fundamental principle of energy security. I mean, he keeps on saying that fundamental principle of energy security. In other words, any country, probably this might be the legacy of oil security. You know, any country, I think no country is free from, right, energy. The security problems or business problems energy poses, no country is free from it, right? And every country has been concerned about energy supplies, right? But the most fundamental concern about energy was just this, diversification of supply. In the past, in conventional wisdom, energy security was about diversification. In conventional sense. I don't know whether this applies still to natural gas. But in conventional wisdom, when people say about energy security, it was about diversification, right? So he's right. Most fundamental principle is diversification of supply. Because in the oil period, like I said, the oil period, most countries were dependent solely on a very few number of suppliers, right? So that dependence on monopoly, certain monopoly countries, posed security problems, strategic problems, right? So every country's hope was to diversify supply sources. Europe is a good example. I mean, Europe is dependent, strategically dependent on a very few suppliers, right? Particularly for natural gas, right? So how to diversify, right? How to diversify. That's the most fundamental security energy security problem. For Korea, for Japan, for China, yes, we had same problem because we were dependent on the Middle Eastern countries about oil, right? Asian countries were dependent on Middle Eastern countries. So our energy security problem for a long, long time, Asian countries, was just this: how to diversify. Because that source, right, monopoly source, in and of itself poses security problems, right? But he argues, Yergin argues, maybe today or in the future, this problem might disappear. Energy security problems will face other, right, supply source problems. And he lists what are other new dimensions of energy security problems, right? And we'll discuss that, right? In general, I think, particularly about natural gas and also oil, the meaning of shale gas and shale oil is that unlike the oil era, who produces energy no longer a problem in the shale revolution era. Because shale, probably I can draw a little bit of geology here. Conventional energy here, right? And unconventional energy here. This is unconventional. This is conventional. Right? The difference is the amount of energy that is contained in the layer. Conventional layer, very small, little amount of energy. But unconventional, almost unlimited amount. Which means that in this era, if we could tap into this source of energy, right? Who produces? No longer a problem, because almost every country can produce. Right? Energy is available. I mean, any country can become a producer in this era if they have technology. Right? So we may be entering this new era. Then, the implication of this for energy security, that's what he's discussing. Now, first I think we have to define what is energy security, right? Let's discuss what energy security is. What is energy security? Energy security has several, I think, components. First, it has physical. First, I think, standard definition, the broad definition. First, we have to, give the broad standard definition. Standard definition is the availability of sufficient supplies at affordable prices. Right? Which has not been the case, right, in most cases. First, there is a physical security aspect. Okay, physical security. In other words, you need to, protect. You need to make sure that energy assets, infrastructure, supply chain, and trade routes, those are safe. It's a struggle over these, right? This is physical energy security. physical energy security. Infrastructure, oil, I mean, you have to have some, right, systems, structure, infrastructure, right? You need to have a field, then you need to transport it, pipelines, right? And pipeline, systems. You need to distribute it, right? Those are supply chain, right? Exploration, pipelines, and distribution. Those are supply chain. But also when you ship it, right? When you ship it, you need to make sure that shipping routes are safe and open, right? That has become a part of the huge energy security problem for a long, long time. Right? It sort of rouses some naval conflicts over shipping routes, right? When oil is exported through, sea lanes, right? Countries have struggled over these, sea lanes. And the U.S. Protected these sea lanes, right? And that's why China was feeling energy insecurity, because U.S. naval ships were protecting most of the sea lanes, right? So what China did was, instead, China was trying to open up overland trade routes through Eurasian continent, right? Because China was feeling insecurity in trade routes. Natural gas, the difference between oil and natural gas in terms of physical security, I think natural gas poses much more complex problems in terms of physical security. Because think about, how natural gas is extracted and how natural gas is sort of shipped, transported, and distributed. Natural gas has much more complex infrastructure, right? Much more complex infrastructure and much more costly infrastructure. LNG system, very complex. When you want to export through ships, boats, when you want to export natural gas through ships, you need to have all kinds of, systems, infrastructure, which is costly, but also becomes very vulnerable to some security threats. Okay, like for instance, Korea. We import a lot of LNG, right? When LNG arrives in Korean ports, right, these ships carrying LNG, natural gas, if they explode, what will happen, right? That's the kind of security, natural gas poses, particularly LNG poses, infrastructure. And they have terminals, right? Import terminals and export terminals. Natural gas cannot be just exported and imported. You need to have terminals at both ends, right? Exporting country, you need to have a exporting terminal. Very complex, expensive system where you need to turn it into, you need to freeze it. You need to freeze the air, natural gas, into some kind of a liquid to transport it, right? From the exporting point. From the importing point, you need to revert it back to natural gas. That's importing facility. So infrastructure, much more complex than oil. So the physical security, much more important about natural gas. And because of natural gas revolution, I think this is something that every country has to keep in mind. Physical security, very important. Countries like Japan, Korea, particularly so. The Korean government, they have to think very hard about this potential terrorist, right, threats to these LNG ports, terminals, right? Particularly when we have some trading point. We are discussing the topic for conference last Wednesday was Asian natural gas trading hub, right? Natural gas trading hub, which means that in this region, Korea, Japan, China, they are going to open a huge natural gas importing infrastructure somewhere, either Shanghai or some ports in Seoul or in Japan. Okay, so that we can import, a lot of, huge volumes of natural gas from different sources. We don't have it yet. So when you have that, this physical security issue will rise. Physical security issue, right? Infrastructure, security. So these are legitimate questions. And trade routes, same. Natural gas, much more important. Oil is, shipped also through ships. But when natural gas is shipped, a lot of LNG ships will be, traveling between the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, and from the U.S., the Asia Pacific. A lot of LNG ships will be traveling, right? Then this issue of trade route security will come up again, right? Who is going to make sure that those, sea routes are safe? We don't have sort of a Somalia type of, right? We don't have those in the Pacific Ocean, but the Pacific Ocean, the difference here is that, America sort of dominating in the Pacific Ocean, but China is building up naval operations. The China-America sort of they compete, right, in this region, and Japan, Russia, right. So they are trying to sort of have a more say on these, right, trading issues. That's one potential problem here in the Pacific Ocean. Physical security, I think that's important, and particularly so in the natural gas era. And I think this is an interesting issue, very interesting issue, how future natural gas trading, right, will affect, security relations in general, which is that's energy security, right? Naval security, right? I think because of this, China, Russia, Japan, Korea, and North Korea, they are spending much more money on naval buildup, right? The United States, Asian pivot to Asia. The whole point of pivot to Asia is about naval operation, because naval operation, in the age of natural gas, so important, right? Trade routes and everything, so important. So, these trends are reflected, right? These energy trends are reflected in security policies or in defense policies in this region, right? And the sinking of Cheonan several years ago, you might know, right? The sinking of Cheonan is sort of a part of this competition, naval competition in this region. The reason why Cheonan sinking broke up was part of this naval competition. And naval competition in this region is sort of driven partially by this energy revolution, right? Second, access to energy. Energy security is about access to energy. In other words, the ability to develop and acquire energy supplies physically, contractually, and commercially. I mean, he gives a very broad definition here. energy access. Energy access, right. Right, energy security is about energy access, right, energy access. Because not every country has energy sources, right? Energy access is limited, right? Or strategically, intentionally limited by producers. So to make sure energy security is provided, those consumers, right? Consumers are making sure that they are provided with energy access, right? But energy access has many different aspects: physically, contractually, and commercially. Right? He gives a very broad definition here. What does this mean? I mean, physically, energy must be accessible physically. Well, we can think of, you cannot import natural gas without LNG from the United States physically, right? The U.S. natural gas is provided to Korea because we have LNG type of technology, right? It's available physically, right? Because of this new technology. So that I think the modern trend is that energy is much more accessible, right? Because of these new technological advancements, right? Contractually, yes, some contractual practices, I think, limit energy access to certain countries. The best example, I think, I keep talking about this region, Asia Pacific. Asia Pacific countries were, in terms of energy access, highly disadvantaged for so many years, right? Contractually. And probably physically also. Physically, yes. The Asia Pacific countries, in terms of energy trading, were sort of outsiders for so many years. So we had to pay high premium compared to European countries, compared to American or Latin American countries. So we were disadvantaged. This, I think, applies squarely to Asia Pacific countries, Korea, Japan. So in terms of energy access, Korea, Japan, highly disadvantaged for so many years. But this is changing. Okay? Korea, Japan, and many other Asia Pacific countries, because demand is rising quickly, because market is adapting to non-OECD demand rise, I think much more energy is accessible to the Asia Pacific countries, to non-OECD consumers, right? Physically, contractually, and commercially. Physically, like I said, technology can make impossible things possible, right? Right. And contractually, we discussed this, right? From long-term contracts to very flexible short-term contracts. There's a transition, right? Because of this long-term contracts practice, the practice of long-term contracts, that's why we were disadvantaged, right? That's why we had to pay premium, right? That's why energy was not accessible to certain countries, contractually. And some contractual limitations, like for instance, we have something called destination clause, which is very important. Destination clause. That destination clause is something where exporter, designates the export destination in the contract. In other words, so the importer cannot divert the destination. Importer imports that volume, then they have to bring it to the designated port only. That's the destination clause, right? Which limits flexibility of the market, right? flexibility of the market, access of energy, right? That's how the market was designed in the past. Destination close. Very rigid market, right? Rigid. There is no flexibility, right? So high premium, destination close, these are things that limit energy access to certain countries, particularly to the Asia Pacific countries, contractually, right? But due to these energy revolutions, the current trend, due to shale revolutions, these, some of the contractual practices that limit energy access are disappearing. Or we are expecting these limitations to disappear sooner or later, because market is becoming much more flexible, right? Flexible. Prices going down, right? Destination closes. These limitations are weakened. That's how the market becomes flexible, so that energy is much more accessible to many countries, right? So that the energy market is becoming much more marketized, right? Marketized. Oil market has been around for 100 years, right? Oil market, oil trading. Oil trading came first, right? Then natural gas is emerging now. Oil market for decades, for many decades in the 20th century, evolved in a way that oil market is becoming much more marketized. Today, oil market, global oil market, much more marketized. Although there's fluctuations in prices, there are many problems, but oil is much more accessible today, right? Physically, contractually, commercially. The current problem facing us is, how do we make natural gas? Okay, how do we make natural gas much more accessible? Right? How do we make natural gas trading much more flexible? Right? Flexible. This is important in terms of commerce, trading, contracts. How do we make natural gas much more flexible, accessible, so that the natural gas market sort of follows the oil market? There's a global oil market today, but there's no global natural gas market. There's no market for natural gas. Natural gas is highly, monopolized, right? It's monopolized and highly divided. Regionally divided. Natural gas market is regionally divided. Okay? There is no global market, no global price, only regional price. Right? So prices for natural gas differ from region to region, unlike oil price. Oil price, we have global oil price, right? Unified global oil price. But natural gas, no unified global natural gas price, which is evidence to, right? Natural gas market is still, right, disintegrated, regionally disintegrated, right? So that natural gas is not accessible, right? It's not freely accessible. So the goal of many countries today in terms of energy security is that they want to secure natural gas. Right? That's country's energy security policy. I mean, natural gas security policy. They want to secure it for cheaper price and freely accessible. That's the goal of natural gas. Physically, like I said, much more possible because we have new technologies, right? And diversified, right? Natural gas supply source is much more diversified, away from small number of countries, right? Dominant, small number of producers like Russia, Qatar, right? Those small number of countries we are moving away from this monopoly type of. So we have much more diversification of supply. So energy security today is much more advanced today. Natural gas, particularly natural gas security, much more advanced. Because the most fundamental principle, diversification is guaranteed, not guaranteed, but more provided, right? But we have contractual problems. Like I said, we have commercial problems. And some physical problems also, right? So this is something you need to examine. How the market for natural gas is changing, right? What are destination close problems? What are spot market, right? What are commercial problems? Why is trading hub is important? What is trading hub? There are so many reports about this. So many reports. And the agenda for the conference last week was exactly this, how the market, LNG market, natural gas market is shifting at a global level, but more particularly this region, Asia-Pacific natural gas market, LNG market. Why should we build a hub, trading hub, right? And if you're interested, best source for these issues is you can download it from the Google. You can type in developing a natural gas trading hub in Asia. That's a report by IEA. Developing an Asian natural gas hub. Issued by International Energy Agency. April 2013, a year ago, April 2013, IEA published this report. And the reason why International Energy Agency is into this issue is that IEA, along with major powers, like particularly the United States, Canada, those new producers, they're suppliers, right? They are new suppliers, and they have natural gas, and they have sufficient, more than enough to meet domestic need. So they want to export. But to export it, right, they need consumers. And they see a huge market here in the Asia Pacific. But Asia Pacific market is not ready to import, right? It's not ready. Because in terms of infrastructure, like I said, natural gas trading, natural gas import, export requires a very complex system, infrastructure, right? But this region, the Asia Pacific, is not ready. We are not ready to import. So IEA, the rationale behind these reports, and a lot of analysts and policymakers are into this topic is that they see the huge market, but they are not ready. But they want to invest into this infrastructure here. Okay, they want to invest, right? So that they can export for the longer period of time. So this is a very important issue. But from energy security perspective, this is how energy security should be studied. You know, this is just commerce, right? America, Canada, Australia, they export the LNG to Japan, Korea, China, huge market, you know, commercially profitable. This is not energy security, right? Energy security is why America, right? Why America wants to LNG here, and how does America want to use these LNG exports for other security purposes. I don't think America is simply wants to make money out of LNG exports. They have bigger goals. The U.S. has bigger goals, bigger security goals, right? And that's how American energy plan is combined with security plan. That's energy security. So this trading hub issue and linking the U.S. production and Asia Pacific demand, linking these two have a lot of security implications. Like I said, the U.S. opened naval base in Australia a year ago. And the U.S. is trying to open another, do you know Jeju Island? Jeju Island. Another one, Jeju Island, right? And the U.S. is like a strengthening naval campaign here in this region, right? From several years ago. Cheonhan sinking, that part of those aggressive campaign. Right? North Korea was sort of getting very sensitive. China, North Korea was getting very sensitive. Right? So these naval operations, right? All these, securities, energy, they go together, right? Because, like I said, LNG exports are, are sort of ocean trading. It's ocean trading, right? You need ocean security, right? Those who rule the ocean, right? They win the game. In this natural gas age, they win the game, right? And the U.S., I think they control the Pacific trading routes for the bigger part of the 20th century. The U.S. ruled the ocean trading, through the Straits of Singapore. If you want to import oil from Africa or from Venezuela or the Middle East, you need to, like countries like China, right? Countries like China, Korea, Japan, you need to pass the ocean off the coast of Singapore, right? No other way. You need to pass that. And American Navy is controlling these sea routes, right? This was the biggest concern China had in the 20th century. And still the same, maybe more trading through the ocean in the future. When you have more LNG ships, you have more trading, right? So we need to think what China thinks of this, right? China needs to import more LNG, right? But then they don't have control over this, right? Ocean. Yeah, that's a problem for China. Right? And we are studying, I'm looking into many aspects of this. Most importantly, it's kind of interesting. We are going to have another conference, March 23rd. In that conference, we are going to invite ministers from Russia, China, Japan, Korea, the US, IEA. They all come 23rd of March. We have a conference on gas tech. It's a huge, thousands of people gather this conference. And the ministers, energy ministers and foreign ministers from these different 5 countries, okay, they will come to Korea and they will discuss this issue. There's so many interesting issues. Japan has its own problems. Japan has big problem, right? Japan geographically, they cannot build LNG importing infrastructure along the sea lines, right? Why? Geographically, Japan is very, right? Yeah, I mean, tsunami and all that, right? Earthquakes, Japan cannot build it. But Japan needs to import a lot of natural gas, right? Then where would Japan put these systems, right? You know what? March 11, 2011, the Fukushima, right, occurred. Fukushima, March 11, 2013. I think that it's a sort of a 3/11, not 9/11. 9/11 was the American, right? In terms of importance, I think very similar. The significance of Fukushima. Fukushima occurred, then the immediate response of neighboring countries, very, very interesting. What was the first response of at that time Prime Minister Putin? What was the first response of Putin to the Fukushima? Do you remember? What was the first response of Putin? What did Russia say about Japanese accident? Putin said, well, we are sorry, but we are here to provide if you need natural gas. Right? Right. So that since then, Japan is buying a lot of natural gas from Russia as a replacement for nuclear power plant, electricity generation. Japan buys a lot of natural gas from Russia, right? Since March 11. And Korean response would be, Japan needs to buy, at this rate, needs to buy a lot of LNG, right? But they can't build these tank terminals, right, in Japan. Then Korean response would be, we are very close, right? Between Korea and Japan, the distance, very short, right? So why don't we go ahead and buy LNG on behalf of you, okay? And we build infrastructure in Korea. Like on the southern tip of Korea, like near Busan, we have a place called Tongyeong, things like that. We have a huge space there. In that space, we build these infrastructure. The storage system, huge natural gas storage system in Korea, and we build that for Japan, for Japan and for Korea. Okay, which is physical system, right? Physical system. Then LNG ships from the U.S., ships from the Australia, Qatar, they move into these Korean ports and systems. And we store it, and probably we can build also a power plant here. Then we generate electricity on behalf of Japan. Then transmit it through undersea, right? Electric sort of a transport system, grid system, all the way to Japan. It's possible. We are thinking of it, but a lot of investment must be made into this. Then, again, so we become a hub, so to speak, trading point. The southern tip of Korea becomes trading point. Then we give energy, natural gas and energy electricity to Japan and also to China. Right? Between China and Korea, distance very short. Right? But separated by the sea, right? Again, same thing, undersea system. Right? Natural gas, electricity, both can be transported through this undersea system. So Korea is in between, right? China, Japan. Very good location. Right? That's trading hub. That's trading hub. But read that IEA report, Developing an Asian Trading Hub. Read that report. It's a very thick report, but it discusses what is needed to become a trading hub, right? When LNG is traded, why this kind of a hub is needed, and what are the experiences of Europe? Because Europe, you have these, right? European countries, you have several trading points of natural gas, right? How that evolved in the European continent. And the report begins with that, European experiences. And conference last week, we also invited people from Europe. We have people from King's College and several other. They came and they told us European experiences, right? How trading, natural gas trading evolved in the European continent. Although, it was kind of interesting. You have several points. I mean, Germany, they import, PNG from Russia. They have one, and then you have UK. They have some trading point, and you have several other points. But our conclusion was that the reason why we looked into these European experiences is that we want to learn from the EU experiences in building Asian trading point. But we see a lot of differences. Some lessons, but still very different. Europe, Asia, very different. We came to that conclusion, very different. So that we Asian countries in building this trading point, we need to design it, not from scratch, but lessons from Europe, lessons from America, but we need to design our own system here. Because if you read particularly the IEA report doesn't recommend neither one of Japan, Korea, or China as trading point, potential hub, trading hub. Instead, IEA report, they sort of suggest Singapore might be a best potential trading hub, right? Then they have table where they compare Singapore, Shanghai, Korea, Japan in terms of requirements for trading points like this. There are requirements, right? There must be trading hub. It's like a market, right? It's like a market. I mean, he doesn't discuss that. Yergin, he doesn't discuss that. Although I think he discusses. I think he discusses, future. I think this is part of energy security. This is part of energy security. Still, these trading hub discussions still part of energy security discussion, because these Asian countries, Korea, Japan, China, or Singapore, in discussing these trading hub ideas, I think they are discussing energy security issues. Because like I said, these Asian countries were weak on energy security, right? Due to lack of these trading points. trading infrastructure or trading practices, right? And Yergin argues that as part of new dimensions of energy security in the future, right? Unlike the oil era, the new dimensions or new principles of energy security must include, maybe he lists 10 different, right? 10 different things. I mean, read it. I mean, what are included in these 10 different principles? Diversification, number one, right? Again, diversification is key to any aspect of energy security, right? Although we are having more diversification. But he also says America is important. Yeah, I mean, interesting argument. Interesting argument. To have a better security, to have a better energy security, you need to, right, you need to consider, right, the US. Because America is too central to the energy market. Right? The way energy market works, America is really central. We can accept it. Particularly in the shale era, in the natural gas era, right? Yes, America is central. And number three, security margin, meaning you need to have backup energy, right? Like strategic reserves, SPR, strategic petroleum reserves, or strategic natural gas reserves. So, I mean, this has been around for a long, long time, right? Because in the oil security era, I mean, this has been one of key policy tools. Strategic petroleum reserves, managed by the IEA. One of central functions of the International Energy Agency as a consumer organization was to run this security margin program, SPR program, Strategic Petroleum Reserves. So that IEA gives orders to IEA members so that you need to have, you know, this amount of, right, backup, oil backup. Korea, if you go down to some city near Busan, Ulsan, if you go to Ulsan, you know, we have a huge storage system, oil storage system. I was invited, I had an opportunity to see that. We have a huge underground tunnels where oil is stored. And that's part of the IEA program. If you become an IEA member, you need to store, you know, like 60 days or 90 days of backup oil. That's a requirement for IEA membership. So every IEA member, according to some rules, they need to have this backup oil. So still, that's important for energy security, right? I mean, that's very important, very important. In case we have disruptions, supply disruptions, because we saw many disruptions. We have seen many supply disruptions or price fluctuations, right? So when producers behave like that, these consumers, right, draw from this backup energy. That's how we sort of guarantee security, energy security. And he thinks that's still important. Right, natural gas, probably same. But like I said, natural gas is different from oil. Different from oil. And natural gas market is becoming like a much more flexible, open, right? But natural gas market is still highly underdeveloped, right? Highly underdeveloped. Then Number 4 principle, well-functioning market. This is what I've discussed so far. Well-functioning market is very important for security, right? Well-functioning oil market, important. Well-functioning natural gas market, important, right? But it depends on what you mean by well-functioning, right? Oil market, right, relatively functioning much better than natural gas market. But still you see a lot of, right, ups and downs in prices, right, fluctuations, crisis that comes in the form of crisis, energy crisis. That happens a lot, even if the market is developed, right? So what he argues is that to get around these crises and disruptions, the oil market must be much more developed, much more open, right? Flexible, right? That's the argument. Number 5, importance of building relationships with exporting nations. Right. Exporting countries. You need to have good relations with exporting countries. Right. That's the energy security. That's how you get energy security. You need to have good relations with exporting countries. But it's not simply about having, bilateral good relations, but do we have more institutionalized consumer producer country relations? Like OPEC is a producer organization, OPEC, right? OPEC, which was founded 1964, right? It's a producer organization, cartel, right? It's a cartel. They set prices, right? It's a cartel because they discuss, where to set prices, and they discuss how much they produce, member countries, OPEC member countries. Each member, how much they produce, they decide internally. It's a cartel, OPEC. OPEC doesn't cover natural gas. OPEC covers only oil, almost oil issues, right? Almost. Like I said, IEA is a consumer organization. So in terms of producer-consumer cooperation, in terms of global institutions, we have OPEC, IEA, these two. And dialogue between two, I don't know how much dialogue going on between these two. Almost no cooperation. Almost no cooperation between OPEC, IEA, right? So I think, in principle, cooperation or dialogue between these OPEC, IEA, very important. Very important, right? Although very minimal, very important, right? Multilateral, OPEC, IEA relationship, so important. One of the issues today, actually I have a presentation on this issue Friday. I'm going to some government meeting where I need to present how G20, which is a global economic forum, how G20 as an organization deal with these energy issues. Globally, right, G20 office, people within G20, they have discussed issues like the IEA membership extension. That's one of the issues at G20. membership extension. In other words, IEA members traditionally have been OECD members. Okay? Because OECD members are traditionally big consumers of energy. Right? But things have changed, like I said. OECD energy consumption is declining. Non-OECD members' energy consumption is going up. So the dilemma facing IEA, according to G20 and many advanced countries, IEA is sort of there is a gap between conventional function of IEA and the new reality. Right? The new reality being we have several big non-IEA member consumers. That's a big problem for IEA. Right? Right? So in order for IEA to function as a consumer organization, we need to bring these new big consumers into IEA, like China, Brazil, India. So G20 is discussing these issues, how to bring in China, India, Brazil. And there was a decision made just a while ago that they have newly built a system where they set up some kind of IEA associate membership. First extended to Brazil, China, India. But there are many problems. What will happen if China becomes a member of IEA? Right? What are potential problems? One immediate problem is that key policy tool IEA have is so-called SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The way it works is that the member country must reveal all the information about energy to the IEA. Right? They have the duty to report. Right? But China doesn't want to reveal their internal energy information. That's one big problem. Right? And clearly, G20, you have more members, right? You have more members. And the more members you have, the more difficulty in terms of coming to some decision, consensus. China, India, they have different energy policies, right? Different energy policies. And, right, different energy priorities. China still, huge coal consumption, right? Way too high coal consumption, right? And they subsidize fossil fuel energy prices. So one of the big issues within the G20 is that how to cut fossil fuel subsidies, which is particularly countries like Saudi, Russia, India, Brazil, China. Those are huge subsidizers, fossil fuels. So that because the government subsidizing energy prices, the energy prices in these countries are so low. There is no international price in these countries. So that they keep on consuming fossil fuels because it's so cheap. That's a big problem from G20 perspective. So China, knows this. When China becomes an IEA member, right, they will, right, put pressure on these issues. They have some duty, new responsibilities. So they need to have some kind of agreement on this. If China becomes member, India becomes member, it's a big problem. It's a big problem. So fuel subsidy issue, this is a big problem. And energy information sharing, that's another problem. And whether or not China will follow, SPR type of guidance from IEA, those are all big problems within IEA. New discussions going on, these issues. So, and I want to add one more. So we have OPEC, IEA, and IEA is undergoing membership changes, right? and identity changes. Because IEA began with OECD members, but it's going to expand into non-OECD members. Now we have another international organization, two international organizations which are very important. One is IEF. He doesn't discuss that. Yergin doesn't discuss that. One is IEF, International Energy Forum. Right? International Energy Forum, which is a new organization that began in 2001. New organization, 2001. It's a combination of both producers and consumers. So now we have OPEC, IEA, IEF, the three organizations. Those are representative international energy organizations. OPEC is solely devoted to oil issue, right? All the OPEC members are members of IEF. So I don't know how IEF will evolve, right, in terms of addressing global energy issues. We have one more, GECF. GECF. What's the full name for that? GECF. Global. GECF is solely devoted to natural gas. Okay, natural gas. It's led by Russia. Russia proposed the creation of GECF. Right? It's kind of a natural gas OPEC, right? You can call GCF natural gas OPEC. GCF is natural gas OPEC, right? So you need to pay attention to what's going on around GCF, because GCF is a counter to US-led shale revolution. Right? GCF is trying to develop as a natural gas OPEC, so that within it they decide production of natural gas, prices of natural gas, right? Things like that. Led by Russia and Qatar, Iran. Those are the leaders. Iran, Qatar, Russia. So it was, I think it was founded early 2000. Way before US shale revolution occurred. Putin tried to control the gas market, global gas market, and prices using this, because they didn't have any natural gas organization, right? But then after US emerged as a producer, and GCF and global natural gas market development go really different ways. So we have to see how GCF will evolve, right? Currently and also in the future. Yes? Yeah, Gas Exporting Countries Forum, right. That's GCF, Gas Exporting Countries Forum. Right. Casually it's called Gas OPEC. Gas OPEC. Right. And he also proposes to have a better energy security, you need to have a better information. Information is important, right? A lot of energy crises occur because of mismatch about information, right? Prices, spike up because of bad information coordination. So information is key, he argues. Information is important to energy security. And in this age of energy revolution, he thinks that those countries that are good in terms of energy security, those are the countries that have good energy industry internally, which is also a good argument. Korea doesn't have, extensive energy industry, but I think the Korean government must consider, right, growing the energy industry, Korean energy industry. Now, next Monday, read chapter 3. He's going to sort out these pages, just remain a little bit, then he's going to give you chapter 3. Then read this chapter 3, then Friday, pick up, right? Pick that up.